What we're going to do is talk a little bit about military situation before, primarily what you knew or didn't know about what your mission was about to involve. We'll talk a little bit about the pre-military life, then we'll focus heavily on the liberation and the actual process of that.
No, I didn't liberate.
I know you are considered though a liberator. I know we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
I know you have some some unsettled.
Yeah, because I just rode in a Jeep. I didn't fight my way in.
But you realize you were still
there.
At the
you
liberation.
were there.
Bob, when did you come into Dachau?
I was trying to figure that out. It had to be, I think the war was actually, our unit ended up in First and Fellbrook, which was a few kilometers from Dachau. There was an airfield nearby, and we were anti-aircraft, so we were called in there. And when the war ended, that's where we were in this town of First and Fellbrook. We took over, as I told you, I was an adjutant of the battalion, and the headquarters took over a city block, took houses of a city block. And in the basement of each one of these houses, there were shoes in one, clothes in another, gold in another, that sort of thing, which you've heard many times. And after we'd been down there, the AMG, that's the American military government, sent word to us, don't go in the basement, that there probably things are booby-trapped. But we'd already been in there and back, so we knew what was down there. And so we inquired. I was trying to think, I've been trying to think all this time why I actually went to Dachau, because I knew nothing about concentration camps. I knew nothing about it, having been over there that long. And something must have triggered it because of that stuff we found in the basement. So I went down there, I got this Jeep and these fellows that could speak German and Yiddish, and we went down there. And
So it was right as the war ended?
I think the war had just ended. The actual fighting had just ended. The military was still in control of Dachau. People couldn't get in or out. We had to be sprayed with DDT when we went in. Those were the days.
I'll let Don answer these questions so we can get them on tape and everything. But
Okay.
what we want are eyewitnesses. You were there in the closing days. The prisoners, the survivors were still in their camps.
Yeah, they were.
So you may not think of yourself as a liberator, but you were certainly an eyewitness.
Yeah,
and we need you to tell us.
We couldn't liberate that little Lithuanian boy, man.
Well, we're going to talk about that actually. You were a captain.
Yeah.
In the Army. I want to talk a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about what you did with the military, your MOS, as they say.
Well, I was drafted from Nashville, and you want the process?
Sure. Give me a little rundown on what
Got
you
it,
did.
right here. Went to Fort Oglethorpe, and a little side note on that, you know Manuel. Did you know Manuel Shatton? Well, Manuel and I went in together. It just happened, we went in together, and they gave us an IQ test. And Manuel had the highest IQ of anybody in that group that went in. But anyway, from Oglethorpe, I went to Camp Eustis for basic training. And then after basic training, I was assigned to the Brooklyn National Guard in Fort Hancock, which was in New Jersey, right outside of New York. And from there, I was there when war was declared. See, I went in and I've got it down. I went in August of '41. And I was up there and finished basic training, got at Fort Hancock, Pearl Harbor. While we were there, Pearl Harbor happened, so the war was declared. In fact, I had a pass to come home to visit Ann, Ann Fensterwell was going to be my wife, and I couldn't get out. And so I remember that, of course, that date. But anyway, from there, after being up there for a while, I went into officer school, officers training. The call came out for officers, so then I went to Camp Davis, which is in Virginia. and was commissioned. And then my first assignment was at Fort Bliss, Texas. And that's where we formed the unit that I joined. And I stayed with that unit till the end of the war. And at the end of the war, and First and Fellbrook, our unit was alerted to go to the Pacific. And I didn't want to go to the Pacific. I've been overseas now since about 3 years, 2 or 3 years. And our colonel was hell-bent on going to the Pacific. So I was able to get myself transferred out, and I was assigned to an infantry group. And because of my rank, I was made an assistant adjutant in the infantry group. I knew nothing about infantry. And anyway, while I was in Le Havre waiting to come home, they dropped a bomb in Japan, and my unit got home before I did. They were already on high seas, you see. And I didn't get home till after they did. And we were stuck in Le Havre. As I vaguely remember, there were lots of storms, and we couldn't get on a troop ship and get out. And so they got home before I did. So you never try to do anything in the Army. You know, you never try to get anything done.
So when were you sent to Germany?
I've got that right here. I left the United States in April 1943, and we went into Africa. We were in the tail end of the African campaign. And from Africa, we went the whole program?
Sure.
From Africa, we went to Sicily, that's still in 43, Italy in 43, Corsica in 44. And we stood out D-Day. We were waiting on D-Day while we were in Corsica, as I remember. And we never got called. So we went to Sicily, and then we went into southern France in 1945, and I arrived in Germany in March 1945. That was on this thing. And while we were in Italy, we were trained to go. We were trained to go landing at Anzio. You remember Anzio? But we didn't have enough trucks, so we had 4 batteries, but not enough trucks, 4 gun batteries, but not enough trucks. So they canceled us out, and they put another unit in our place, and they were wiped out almost to a man. So one of those things that happened. So, but that's the story of it.
Tell me a little bit about, you were in Italy, this is before Germany, right?
Yeah.
What did you know was going on in Germany, in Poland?
Well, we only knew what was going on in our own area. I mean, you know, we were busy. We were being bombed and strafed, and we had our own job to do in our own area. The only way we had information really was from periodicals that we got, Stars and Stripes, and those other periodicals that were published. As I remember, we never got anything officially of what was happening somewhere else.
Had you heard the rumors about what was happening to the Jews in Europe?
No.
You hadn't heard anything?
No, not a thing, not a thing. And I thought about that. No, I didn't know a thing about it. And only, now we were out in the field when Roosevelt died. If you remember that date, I remember that. So we hadn't reached First and Fellbrook. We were still out. The war was still on when he died. So we did get that information. We got over field phone. Like Joseph was telling us how they talk on their phones, you know, and they get images and so on. Nothing like that in World War II. We had field phones, and we got a call on our field phone that the president had died. So I remember that, and we were surrounded. We were in a house somewhere. I vaguely remember this. We were in a house somewhere, and we were surrounded, and we couldn't get out at that time. So I don't know any details of it. But that's.
So tell me, you got to Germany in April?
Yeah, it says right here. I landed in Germany in, is that what I said? No, March 1945.
What date did you liberate? Did you drive your Jeep in?
Well, I was trying to think of that. When was Dachau liberated?
April 11th?
I think so, in April. So this had to be probably in end of April or first part of May, because everything was still there. They were all there, and
Time from liberation to when you came in 3-4 weeks later, 2 weeks later. Did you hear anything then?
no,
Still knew nothing?
no.
So driving a Jeep in, what were you thinking you were going
Well,
to?
we had these things in the basement of the houses we took over, which we were told came from a concentration camp down the road. So we knew something was there. I tried to think about that, Dawn. I might have known, but I don't remember. It's impossible that I couldn't have known there was
Did you know
something.
them to be Jews or just prisoners?
No, I think I knew them to be Jews. I think that I did know. Jews and gypsies. I think I did know that. That's why I took. Now you're opening a new vein for me. That's why I took this fellow that could speak Yiddish. These guys were out of our medical unit, so we had a medical unit attached to us. And these guys were out of the medical unit, and they were Jewish, and they could speak Yiddish. One of them could speak Yiddish, another one could speak German. But you answered the question. Maybe I did know, and I don't remember.
I remember you said something about that, and I was wondering what made you. Thank you.
But there had to be a reason.
There was a reason why you brought something up.
Yeah.
So maybe you
But
knew.
I knew, I knew I lost some family in Munich. Some of my grandparents' relatives were in Munich, and I knew that.
Did you know how?
No. And we were near Munich. And I knew that, but nothing, it didn't, I didn't put two
Your
and three.
parents were Jewish?
Oh, yeah.
Had they told you anything about what was going on?
No. See, I left in 1941, and I don't remember reading anything at that time. There probably was something there.
So on your way into Dachau, what was the first thing you saw?
Well, after we got into Dachau, well, the first thing I noticed about Dachau was that it was surrounded by a high wall, and we went in the gate, right in the middle of town, right in the middle of Dachau.
What about along the street on your way in?
Nothing, just houses, regular houses, just like houses here. And when we went in, you want me to describe what I saw? Is that what you want?
Yeah.
Well, there's a big parade ground. I mean, I can remember this vividly. There's a big parade ground, and there's a flagpole right in the middle of the parade ground, and the administration building was right behind it. And over to the left, as we went in, well, when we went in, the first thing we saw was a group of men were around a big bonfire, and they were roasting something, I don't know what. And at that time, I didn't know what, but we walked up there to look, and one man fell into the fire. These things are vivid in my mind. One man fell into the fire. Nobody moved to take that man out. Nobody. So one of these fellows and I went over and we pulled that guy out of the fire. He wasn't burned or anything, but he'd been in the fire. And we asked why somebody didn't pull these fellows out of the fire. And they said this is the first time they'd seen potatoes that they could roast and eat. That was the answer. I remember that. Now, after that, it was after that that we met this fellow. I wish I had his picture. I think I did, and I lost it. After that, these cages were over as you went in the compound and the parade ground. These cages were over, as I remember, to the left of the compound. And has anybody else told you any of this? No. And this fellow told us, this Lithuanian guy told us, that they kept dogs in there, big dogs. And they lined people up in the parade ground as if for announcements, and they turned these dogs out. Now, this is what he told us. I no way to verify these things. This is what he told us. And then behind the parade ground were these barracks. Where's that one, the barracks? And we rode the Jeep down there, between these lines of barracks, and the people were still in the barracks. And, you know, they looked at us and we looked at them. Nobody says anything to anybody. And, you know, they looked terrible. And then we went over to the crematorium. This Lithuanian fellow took us to the crematorium, and we went in the crematorium. And then I remember behind the barracks and the crematorium were the cars, the cattle cars. There was some on a track, but there was a track in Dachau behind Dachau itself, this area we were in. There were still those boxcars down there. I remember that. And then somehow we got with these fellows that took us over and showed us the graves that they had to dig and so on. And this Lithuanian kid also took us to the officers' quarters, which were over maybe to the right there in another area. Beautiful quarters, just fine quarters as you'd seen anywhere. And they were still furnished, furniture was still, and nobody disturbed them, and we went through those. And so.
What was going through your mind?
Well,
Not just as an American, but as a Jewish.
I got sick. I got sick after this thing, momentarily sick. And it was a little too much, you know. And the thought went through my mind at that time, I think, these guys living in those nice quarters and at the same time doing these things to people. So, Dawn, I got to be honest with you. It didn't really dawn on me. It didn't sink into me until I got home and read and heard and discussions what I saw. And you know, I was attached to the Air Corps. I mean, we would follow the Air Corps around to a certain degree. They used us as field artillery too. We had 90 millimeter guns, and like in Corsica and Sicily, they used us for the harbor. But you know, we get raided all the time. They'd come over at night, and even at home, when I'd hear it for a while, after a while, when I'd hear an airplane come over, I'd wake up and suddenly get very tense, like you're going to go, you know, get away from it. It's funny. That sort of thing stuck with me for a long time. And I tell you another thing, that thought, these are personal thoughts, but I thought of my children. See, when we came back and I had children, the boxcars and what I saw, I thought, you know, this could have happened to us. You know, that did sink in, but afterwards, you know, at the time, you're busy doing what you're doing. You're thinking about yourself when you're over there, and you see awful things, you know, in a war anyway. And so, to answer you, at that very time, I was affected, but not as deeply affected as I was after I got home and got involved in things, found out the whole story. But as I recall, Eisenhower put out a command, an order, that every soldier who was near a concentration camp or a camp should go to the camp. I think that's correct. I think I remember that. He wanted the enlisted person, the soldiers.
Have you met any inmates while you were there?
No, except this way, just going up. And they'd come to us, and we go to them, but not meet them, no.
What was the general feeling of the other troops that were there?
The other fellows that were there, we all felt, they felt the same way I did. I can't tell you what their reactions were, but it was terrible.
Do you recall any of the conversations that you had with them?
No, I really don't. I know we talked about the things that were in the basement of our houses. That alerted us to a lot of things. And, but no, we really didn't talk about it.
So you brought somebody with you, spoke Yiddish.
Yeah, Yiddish and German. One of them spoke German, one of them spoke Yiddish. Or the same guy might have spoken both. But see, you rang a bell. There was a reason why I did that. And so I must have known something. I really must have. Don't remember it or realize it. or didn't realize it, but to take a guy that spoke Yiddish, pick a soldier out like that, and this, I can tell you which one he is. He's this one right there. There were 3 or 4 of us. We all went in the Jeep. Here's the rest of them that were with me. That's the guy in the middle. These were either dentists or doctors.
That came to assist in their aid.
No, that I pulled out to go with me. They were the medical unit.
So how long were you in Dachau?
Oh, I guess maybe 3 or 4 hours.
And then what happened? Where'd you go from there?
Went back to camp.
Right.
Went back to First and Felbert, not camp. Went back to our headquarters at First and Felbert. I probably talked about it when I went back there to people.
Do you recall?
No. Well, Dawn, you're talking about 60 years ago.
I'm
No.
surprised that you could remember.
I remember these other things, and I remember this because I looked it up on my record. And but I don't remember any discussion about it. And when you think about it, from what we know now, probably the guys in there weren't interested in it.
Tell me about the Lithuanian Jew, the matchmaker.
He's a little fella. He's about my size. And he told us that he'd been kept alive because he was a watchmaker, and he could make bombs. He did the intricate part of bombs, and that he had a wife that was nearby, and he wanted us to take him to his wife. Pleaded with us to take him to his wife, which we couldn't do. That's.
Do you know why he wanted to do that? Bring them to his wife?
Well, he probably wanted to take off with his wife and go somewhere. I don't know. I can't answer that.
He didn't say.
No. As I remember, he didn't. He just asked us if we'd take him to his, that he had a wife down the road. And so there must have been a camp down there. There must have been a female camp that, for women. I don't know that. I don't know. We didn't know that.
Where'd you go after that?
Where?
After the camp? Not Dachau.
After Dachau, I went back to headquarters in First and
after
Fifth.
headquarters.
Yeah.
Where'd you go after headquarters? How long were you in the service after that?
Well, I was trying to think of that because I left. Let me see if I've got that down here. I was discharged in November of '45. So I had, in those months intervening, I left the unit because I had a disagreement with the colonel on this, and he was a full colonel. It ain't easy to disagree with a full colonel. I was just a captain, and he reassigned me. He removed me from the adjutant's post and put me in charge of S4, quartermaster, and so took me away from him. But and he was a National Guard. Wasn't regular Army. So I left, and as I say, I was assigned and because of my rank, I was put in with I think it's on here. No, it's not on here. I was put in charge of an infantry group, which, it's terrible. I wasn't anything with infantry. And we were all waiting to come home. I think it was 110th Infantry. I'm not sure. But anyway.
So you were in the service for about, 5 more months after liberation?
Yeah, I got out in November.
Okay.
Got back to Nashville, Indiana. Was discharged at Fort Atterbury in Indiana. Right out.
Back to Nashville?
And then came back to Nashville, yeah.
Tell me about that, coming home.
What's to say? I mean, I got discharged. I think we went to Chicago first because my mother was in Chicago.
Did you tell people what you saw?
No,
How come?
not then, not right away.
Why
No.
do you think you didn't tell them that?
I don't know. I didn't talk much about it in fact, my wife made a point about that, and later on I talked about it. And I got involved with the Holocaust series at Vanderbilt, got involved in things here, and but really didn't talk much about it at the
Do
time.
you know why?
I think I was deeply affected by it. I really do, and thought about that could have happened to us, you know. And I related it to my own children, and when these people come in to speak about the Holocaust, Bob Madden, have you met him yet?
Next.
Yeah, he fought his way in. He and I go up and talk to these people, but they aren't interested in us. We try to talk to them and ask them things, and they don't want to talk to us. I don't know why. In fact, I got in a big argument with a guy at Vanderbilt in one series about what went on in Dachau. He might have been right, though, from what Felicia said. She said nobody was gassed there, and he made the announcement that nobody was killed at Dachau. And, you know, I'd seen this.
Killed and gassed are two different things.
Yeah. So I'd seen the crematorium, I'd seen this, and I raised my hand, which was a terrible mistake, and questioned, you know, I threw out the question, look, I was there, I saw this, and boy, he put me down. I mean, I remember he put me down in a hurry. You know, you just don't do that. Refute something somebody's going to say that's a speaker. But anyway.
How do you feel about that?
Well,
I mean, how do you feel about that? You saw the crematorium,
yeah,
you saw evidence of burning,
yeah.
yet people say that there was no such
Yeah.
thing at Dachau. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's these deniers, you know, it's unbelievable. I mean, you react to it like I did, and in a public forum, and which you don't do, but that was an instant reaction without thinking, I think. And you want to question these people, you know.
What do you want people to know about what happened?
Well, I think they should know everything. I think they should know everything that happened.
How do you explain the hate? How do you explain the evil of it all?
I think it's unexplainable. It's hard to explain that. I mean, why things are happening today, the same sort of thing. Why does somebody get mad and shoot somebody? Why do they lynch? Why did they lynch people? I mean, it's.
Do you think you were more deeply affected as a liberator? I know you reject that term, but for the sake of argument, let's work with it. Do you think that you were more deeply affected as a liberator because you were Jewish?
Sure, absolutely. That I'm certain of. That I'm no question about that.
Because as you said, you placed your wife and children there.
Yeah, I had no question about that. I felt that very deeply. And
did you have a sense of loss that you hadn't known it was going on until then? And that this has been going on for 5 years?
Yeah.
I'm just finding out about this?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because my intense interest was in another area at that time. You know, you just, when you're, it's trite to say this, but when you're in a war, you're sort of looking out for yourself and the guy next to you, you know. So you don't have time to do those things, although war is the most boring thing that ever could happen and a complete waste of time, but you still are involved in what you're doing, and you've got people that you have to look out for too. So I don't think you necessarily sit down and think those things out at the given time and concentrate on that sort of thing. But I'm sure when I got back there, I was deeply affected in relating what we saw and what we had in the basement of those places and what I saw at the camp. I'm positive of that.
Did you tell your parents?
My mother, yes. My father has already died. But my mother, yes.
How did she react?
I can't tell you that. I can't remember that.
Did she have any, was there anything that led you to believe she may have known what was going on?
Probably
Through her
did. Yeah, she's a well-read woman. She probably did. She did, and see, my father died in 41, right after in 40, right after I came to Nashville. And I'm from Iowa, and she was still at home in Iowa, and then she moved to Chicago. So she she had her own problems at that time.
What brought you to Nashville?
Well, that's a story. Then employment brought me to Nashville. I graduated in school in '38, and my father's business was such that he had a broker here in Nashville. And the two of them got together and decided I should come to Nashville to work. So I worked for him in Nashville. And then I became a traveling salesman. I traveled all through southern Tennessee and northern Alabama. I was in the baby food business. Worked for Gerber's Baby Food.
In the baby food business.
Yeah, Gerber's Baby Food.
I'm gonna make a tape change.
I'm gonna do a quick tape change.
Were you taping all that while I'm talking?
Sure.
That's bad.
Every bit of it.
It's
That's
live on
bad.
Today's Show. We're live.
That's
2020.
bad. But you're asking me interesting questions that I can't answer.
Okay.
I really can't, truthfully.
And you know what? It may happen where in a couple months you go, you know, I think or I didn't know, and I'm pretty sure and those are always opportunities for us to talk again.
Yeah.
You can always call me.
Yeah.
This doesn't expire, you know.
Of course, these memories are, I can remember pretty much detail of this stuff. And as I say, that's a long time ago.
It is, but
Lots.
I'm getting the feeling that there is a sense of knowing. There's a sense of knowing that you were about to embark on something really amazing. You had a camera. You had someone that could speak Yiddish. I think there's a sense that maybe you didn't even know how large it was, but there's a definite sense that somewhere within you, you knew that there was something pretty amazing going on.
I think you're right. But I've
What was in your basement, or the basements that you stayed in? Because you said that kind of clued you.
Say that again.
In the basements in the houses?
Yeah.
What was there?
There
You
were,
said was sort of, you were being tipped off at the time.
well, one house had shoes in it. Another house had hair in it. Another house had clothing in it. And another house had, believe it or not, gold fillings in it. I remember.
Did you find it surprising to see how many homes were around Dachau?
No, Dachau was a sizable town. It had an airport. That's not joke. That's why we were there.
I meant around the camp.
Oh,
Were you surprised to see how many homes,
yes.
people lived
Yeah,
there while
you
this
know,
was going on?
yes. That we
And said they
discussed
didn't
that.
know.
We discussed that. Someplace we discussed that, and somebody, I didn't, but somebody went around to those houses and asked if they knew if anything was going on behind the walls,
And they said,
and it was denied. They didn't know anything.
how do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's unbelievable, unbelievable.
Do you find it to be
But they were right across the street. I mean, it's just a city street. That thing was right in the middle of Dachau.
Certainly they heard.
Oh,
If
had
not,
to
they
hear,
smelled.
had to hear. And they had to know, they had to know. Those railroad cars coming in behind, they had to know. When I answer you another way, one day when we were in the house, when I was in one house, a knock came on the door, and there was a woman at the door, a German lady, who wanted to speak to Captain Eisenstein. Now, how she knew Captain Eisenstein was in that house is a mystery. We all asked that. That I remember. How in the world did she know? Nobody asked her. Should have. But she wanted to see Captain Eisenstein. Well, they wouldn't let me go to the door. And why did you want to see Captain Eisenstein? This was relayed to me. I want him to know this is my house, and I want my house back, and I helped save Jews. I remember that. And she helped save Jews, and the stuff was in the basement, I remember that. That's a detail I remember, but they wouldn't let me go to the door. That's a true story.
How do you wrestle with the memories?
Pardon me?
How do you deal with the memories?
How do I deal with them?
How do you make sense out of them for yourself?
Well, you can't make sense out of some of these things that happen. war isn't very sensible in itself, you know. I can't answer that directly. There's no way to make that sense of what was taking place. I can't respond to that.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think you've gotten pretty well.
Have you been sufficiently grilled?
No, I don't
Have
know.
you been back at all to parts of Europe, or?
Yes, and my wife wanted to take a trip down the Rhine, wanted to see the castles on the Rhine. I've been back to Europe many times, various places. And I did not want to go on a trip down the Rhine. I did not want to be in any part of Germany. I did not want to walk on the street in Germany. Now that might answer you part way. But she wanted to go. So, you married? You went. So, and it was a horrible, she didn't like it either. She became very uncomfortable. And when we went to these, and we went to one of those towns, where is it, that has U Street? Which town? We went to one of these, beautiful, Germany's beautiful. It's a beautiful city. And we occupied other houses, and during going back, we occupied other places all through Germany till we got to Fürstenfeldbruck. And incidentally, it wasn't too friendly either. We didn't dare walk on the streets without being sidearmed, and two of us. And of course, war was going on, and they treated the Fräuleins treated I don't know whether they want to get in this sort of thing, but the Fräuleins treated our troops terribly. They'd entice these guys into going someplace with them and then holler rape, or something like that. So the poor guys, you know, ended up in trouble. Oh, I remember that too. That was awful. We got involved in that because we had a battalion. We had about 1,200 troops in that. But anyway, war is interesting.
Very interesting. And I thank you so much for coming out.
Well, thank you.